Hello and welcome to Money Matters. It's the summer holidays, and with some schools out, hotel quarantines decreased, and airlines no longer banned for bringing in too many COVID cases, more people are tempted to fly again. But as Zela reports, traveling continues to be a turbulent and costly experience.
Excited to fly. Bags packed. Ready for a summer holiday.
170,000 travelers passed through the Hong Kong airport in May. That's an increase of 186% compared with a year ago, thanks to a relaxation of the city's border controls. With air travel resuming around the world, passengers need to be aware of flight cancellations, longer queues at the airport, and missing baggage.
But the passenger traffic is still a far cry from the pre-pandemic days of millions of travelers per month. Mei Song is an executive at an airport hospitality company, which provides services in over 250 locations around the world. She says travelers are opting to take extended trips for weeks at a time.
There's a lot of pent-up demand. Right now in Hong Kong, we have 7-day quarantine. So you wouldn't leave for 4 days and then come back for a 7-day quarantine, right? You would probably extend your stay and do a bit of business and leisure.
The number of passengers using the lounges increased by 3 times from the first quarter to the second quarter this year. Mei warns travelers that there are fewer flights nowadays.
The key things is that the frequency of flights have significantly decreased. Your transits may not be as smooth as it used to be, right? And you have a longer transit time. So you need to do research and say, okay, well, what am I going to do in that time? You know, is it in the middle of the night? Do you need a place to stay? And that's why we have our airport hotels where you have flexible booking hours. Come. Join the ride.
Careful.
So spoiled.
Recently, Mei expanded the product offerings of the company and launched a buggy service.
We anticipate the future and anticipate their needs. So when travel picks up, we're there. We're there to make the services more comfortable.
In Hong Kong, it really depends on...
Prudence Lai is a research analyst. She says air travel is recovering faster in some parts of the world than others.
We do see North America and Latin America to see quicker recovery to almost 80% recovery to pre-COVID levels. Europe is slightly slower, I would say, due to geopolitical tensions and inflations adding extra costs to travelers when they are making their plans to travel. APAC, I would say, see really quick recovery this year, especially in Southeast Asian countries. We're expecting triple-digit growths in terms of number of passengers compared to last year, as Southeast Asian countries reopened their borders for quarantine-free leisure travel in H1 this year. So countries like Singapore, Thailand.
For those planning to travel, go online and check out the entry requirement of your destination. Find out whether it requires a PCR test, proof of vaccination, or even quarantine. For those coming back to Hong Kong, go on the coronavirus.gov.hk website. Click on the inbound travel link to find out the rules to return to the city.
On Cheung Chau Island, Richard Langford is on his way home after a visit to the UK to spend time with his family.
As my father passed away last November, my mother's been living on her own at this time. I needed to spend some quality time with my mother.
His trip was only supposed to be for 3 weeks.
On the morning of our flight back to Hong Kong, we arrived in good time at the airport and did our PCR test as planned. Straight after my PCR test, I received an email from Turkish Airlines, had a flight ban from the Hong Kong government, the flight is cancelled. Of course, I'm pretty upset. I had a look to see, is there any other flights going back that day with any other airlines? There was nothing. All we could do was head back to my hometown again.
He got a 45% refund on his round-trip plane ticket. Luckily, his quarantine hotel let him cancel the reservation without paying a penalty. Then he had to book another return flight to Hong Kong.
Remember, when you're booking a flight back to Hong Kong, the flight is not the most difficult bit. It's finding a quarantine hotel that's available for those dates. And right now, quarantine hotels are very heavily booked. Anyway, I found one available for 3 weeks later that matched up with a flight.
On attempt number 2 to return to Hong Kong, Richard flew from London to Amsterdam. The Amsterdam to Hong Kong leg was delayed for a couple of hours.
Once we'd done all the checks on arrival back at Hong Kong airport, we arrived at the baggage reclaim lounge. There was a notice board up listing our name amongst 80 other people who baggage had missed the flight. My first reaction was, how could that have happened? Cathay flight took off 4 hours late. The baggage handlers had plenty of time to transfer the baggage onto our Cathay flight. How did it miss it? Anyway, off we went to our quarantine hotel with just our hand baggage and the clothes we were wearing. Finally, on day 5, our baggage arrived. The 2 jigsaw puzzles I had bought to do in quarantine, but anyway, it was too late. It was already day 5, there wasn't time to do them. Yes, I can finally change my clothes.
He made a claim on his travel insurance for the delayed baggage, but it was denied.
This does not apply when we're flying back to Hong Kong or arriving at our final destination. Now, that might not sound too bad if we're going home and waiting out for our bags at home. But in our case, and during the times of COVID, we have to wait for our delayed baggage in a quarantine hotel room with only the clothes we're wearing and only our hand baggage. So it wasn't very pleasant for us. And we weren't too pleased with the insurance company for being unhelpful.
Prudence says the delays and lost baggage at the Amsterdam airport are not unusual.
So during the first waves of COVID, most airports laid off a portion of their staff to reduce cost, and now it's taking them longer time in order to recruit. It's very difficult for European or airports in the US to respond to this sudden explosive demand. Hence, the huge queues at airports, or strikes happening, or Heathrow Airport actually suggesting airlines to cut down their capacity.
Gilly Wong leads a consumer council. It's been receiving more travel-related complaints as people resume air travel. In the first 6 months of 2022, the number of complaints related to air tickets increased by 429% compared with the year earlier.
It is mainly related to the cancellation of flight. If you're talking about a departure date is on January the 7th, all in a sudden it deferred for a day, and then they have to make a connecting flight to somewhere else, and then they couldn't catch the connecting flight. That caused the problem to the passenger a lot.
She advises travelers to allow for wiggle room in their itineraries.
Because of all the uncertainties on the punctuality of the flight schedule, probably the most important advice is when you schedule your traveling itinerary, it's better to scatter a little bit to make it leaving you more time to manage all these contingencies at the end.
The number of complaints related to quarantine hotels increased by 285% in the first half of 2022 versus a year ago.
The most concerning dispute is about refund. In case of cancellation of the hotel room, whether they can get the refund or not. So this is the kind of price dispute that we encountered all the time. And some hotels are more cooperative. They refund much faster after we receive the complaint and then consider with them. But some maybe will take a longer time.
When a dispute is resolved, it can take the hotel 1 to 3 months to process a refund. Some hotels won't give refunds. She recommends reading the terms and conditions of the hotel booking very carefully.
Whether there's any admin charge, surcharge, or maybe any other penalty for you in case of you need to have a change in the schedule, because some penalty or maybe the admin charge could be quite high.
With more people considering travel again, Gilly has some final words of advice.
We are under the new normal, so don't expect what you have experienced in the past before the pandemic will continue right now. No matter from the booking or the terms and conditions, whether the availability and also the price of everything will be quite different. So when you decide to go for traveling, you have to be really plan ahead and look into the details far more in detail as compared with the past.
Coming up on Money Matters, how hydrogen gas is being integrated into the local economy. Stay with us. Welcome back to Money Matters. The concept of a hydrogen economy has gained global interest as climate change forces us to reduce carbon worldwide. But can the dangers be overcome? Alice Kahn reports on how tech companies and scientists in Hong Kong are working to develop the hydrogen economy.
Hong Kong relies on its two energy providers for all its power. Fossil fuels make up the majority of the fuel mix. But fossil fuel produces carbon dioxide, and that causes global climate change. If we want to keep temperature rises down, the world has to cut its CO2 emissions. Enter hydrogen, a clean-burning, widely available gas that many say is the next big thing in energy production.
Well, hydrogen economy, because it's an economy use hydrogen as the major source of power, because hydrogen will not produce pollutant. So it would be better to use hydrogen as the major source of power, but this of course requires a lot of technological advance.
Albert Lau and his father run a battery business in Hong Kong and China. There are times when they don't have to rely on a power company, in this case CLP, for their electricity. Today we visited their factory in Yuen Long.
Alice, I'm bringing you into an off-grid room. Please take a seat. Let's turn on some lights. You thirsty?
Yeah. Albert, did you say it's an off-grid room, but where is the power come from?
Yes, this is an off-grid room. Power comes from hydrogen. So what we have here is power up lighting. We can add more light, of course. Boil water, cook a steak. This steak has just been pan-seared by low-carbon hydrogen electricity.
Hydrogen is the most abundant element in the universe. When used to produce energy, hydrogen produces water and is carbon-free. Currently, the simple way to make the gas is by electrolysis, a process using electricity to split water into hydrogen and oxygen. Hydrogen can be stored in liquid form or as a gas. Albert says the hydrogen economy hasn't caught on because the highly inflammable gas is difficult to store and transport. He says a process called embrittlement could lead to explosions.
Hydrogen will just go into the lattice and matrix of the steel alloy or high carbon steel alloy or carbon fibers, and then it will slowly decrease the strength of the pressure vessel, and then it will explode.
He has spent a substantial amount of money on R&D to solve the problem. And a few years ago, he had a breakthrough. He produced hydrogen in a solid form.
So this is our invention. This is silicon material.
Then are these sands, kind of?
It comes from sand. What is special about our invention is that it has a very, very high surface area. So it's very, very porous.
Then what's that for?
So with such a high surface area, it traps a lot of energy in this material, such that when we put it into a liquid, a basic solution, and then some chemical reactions will happen.
Yeah. Okay, are you going to show me?
Yes, yes, yes. So this is a basic solution. This is hydrogen that you're seeing here bubbling. There's hydrogen coming out. And this hydrogen is pure hydrogen.
His invention is called nanoporous silicon, and he's patented it in all major jurisdictions.
How do you make that?
So, the way we make it is we use very high temperature metallurgical processes. So when we refer to metallurgical processes, it's high temperature foundries, like a steel mill, which is extremely scalable.
The energy is stored inside the pores of the silicon. Albert says the granules can be stored and transported safely and will release hydrogen when needed.
We'll transport our silicon to location of use, and then we'll generate hydrogen on demand, which becomes fuel to generate electricity or compress it and then fuel into hydrogen buses. So in a sense, we are redefining or reinventing the wheel of how the hydrogen economy may look like.
Albert spent 6 months building a hydrogen converter that can produce up to 5 kilograms of the gas a day, enough to power 5 flats.
Air conditioning, lighting, television, refrigerator, etc. So this electricity, this hydrogen generated, where you can see here, it's all bubbling, and then the hydrogen will pass through a fuel cell. Fuel cell is a unit that converts hydrogen into electricity. So we get electricity here.
Albert says the generator can be scaled by up to 10 times to provide charging capacity for any device that needs electricity, like electric cars. Investors have taken notice.
The true adoption for hydrogen economy is if we can locally produce at location, producing hydrogen, then safe, then transportation is not an issue. You can produce hydrogen. That's the ideal situation.
Lam says he will buy the silicon powder from Lao and design his own generation unit. Lam has already received orders for 3,000 units in Norway. The plan is to power homes in remote locations with no connection to a power grid. He also plans to install some on remote islands in Hong Kong.
The initial stage is about 10 million US, and then once we start scaling the machine and having the application done, then we'll probably put another 70 million, 80 million into the investment.
It's a money-making business?
It is. I think it will be. Because I think in the world now, people are looking for alternative, a green alternative, and this offers this green alternative to the household.
The government hopes the hydrogen economy will create tens of thousands of jobs. Albert Lau is not alone trying to create a hydrogen economy. Professor Eric Cheng has also made breakthroughs in this area. Cheng thinks using hydrogen gas in a tank is not safe, but he thinks he's found a solution.
It's first one in Hong Kong and first one in the world. The new energy is the ammonia. Ammonia is a zero-emission gas because there's no carbon there, so 100% zero carbon. This ammonia able to provide high power, high energy. It's much cheaper than the other gases. For ammonia, the formulation is NH3, so you got 50% more hydrogen than the hydrogen gas.
Like hydrogen, ammonia is flammable, but the storage pressure is less, and that makes it much safer to transport. Cheng's idea is to convert ammonia into hydrogen at the location where it is needed, using his device, an ammonia converter.
This is a cracking technology, 99.99%. So most of the gases already convert all into hydrogen.
Is it hydrogen inside?
Yes, they're all hydrogen here. So this output here will be hydrogen. So pass through this cooler, a lower temperature, and a higher concentration hydrogen, and then this will go to our fuel cell. The fuel cell actually is just convert the hydrogen into electricity. And then next, this will be electricity power. Then we go to charge the battery inside the vehicle.
Cheng has already deployed his device to power this car, using ammonia conversion to power its battery. Simon Cheng invested more than $10 million in Cheng's converter. He's already made a coach bus that will soon use ammonia tanks and the converter to power a fuel cell.
This is a battery operation, but in the future, there will be the ammonia to hydrogen fuel cell.
Simon expects this type of vehicle will interest fleet operators because government is pushing them to adopt zero-emission vehicles.
There's thousands and thousands of coach or the minibus in Hong Kong running the road every day. If they are all changed to the ammonia to hydrogen, that's a huge market for us to develop.
But a Chinese university economist says creating the cleaner technology is one thing. Getting consumers to sign on is another challenge altogether. Costs will rise as society converts to greener fuels. Adoption could be unpopular.
You have to ask whether citizens want to pay more for that. Don't just ask them whether you want a green society. You also have to ask them an additional question whether you are willing to pay for it.
With her feet firmly planted on a surf skateboard, Duo Lan moves her hips and glides down an empty road in Beijing. The professional dancer runs a free weekly surf skating class for women on Saturday afternoons. Surf skating is a novice-friendly version of skateboarding that uses a more flexible wheel assembly to enable riders to carve turns, like in surfing. The sport has taken off in Chinese cities, especially among women, probably because there are also fewer wipeouts than in regular skateboarding. Many took up the sport as a hobby when COVID curves made summer travel difficult. Clubs, networks, and group classes have proliferated. Duo Lan started teaching after she lost her dancing job due to China's dynamic zero-COVID policy that forced her foreign dance company to leave the country. Girls are particularly attracted to surf skating. A women's community has developed. Surf skateboards range in price from around 400 yuan to about 4,000. Women account for around 70% of sales. Cuba has been flooded with motorinas, as these two-wheeled low-speed electric motorcycles are called on the island. While it's a fad for many, it is also a partial solution to transportation problems. Fuel shortages have plagued the population of the Caribbean nation. Riders gather to do stunts, share their riding experiences, and exchange ideas about their modifications to make them move faster. With the island's chronic fuel shortages and the need to queue for hours to fill up with gas, the electric motorcycles have become a lifeline to their young owners. The Cuban government authorized the importation of these electric vehicles to try and mitigate the fuel shortages. In the meantime, their introduction helps reduce climate change. A third of the 300,000 motorcycles circulating in the country are in the capital, Havana. Most come from China.
That's the show. Thanks for watching. Next time on Money Matters, how Hong Kong is holding on to its status as Asia's leading hedge fund investment hub. See you then. Good night.